countries that have committed to fibre-based broadband as part of their macroeconomic growth strategies, China stands out. And that's not just because of the sheer scale of the exercise. We're talking about investments of up to $22 billion US in a 3-year period to 2012, but it's the timescales involved as well. In Shanghai, where we are today, for example, in 2008, you could only get an average broadband speed of 2 megabits per second. But by the end of 2012, a new citywide metro optical network is going to help deliver broadband speeds of up to 100 megabits per second to every home and business in this metropolis of 22 million people. But digging in hundreds of miles of fibre into the ground does not a fibre-to-the-home broadband strategy make. There's much more to it than that. So I talked to Perrin, a senior analyst from Heavy Reading, about the transport network infrastructure that the carriers need to deploy to support their fibre-to-the-home strategies.
If you look at the fiber access network and all the bandwidth that's being generated and created from these networks, it has to go somewhere across the city, across the country, ultimately around the entire world. So the transport network needs to be upgraded to keep pace with any innovation and growth that's going on in the fiber access network. It's as critical a piece as the access network, certainly.
So what are the key considerations that fibre access service providers need to think about with their metro transport networks?
Metro networks are an important part to overall upgrade that's going on around fiber to the home. We're seeing a lot of carrier interest in the metro right now. Part of the issue is simply scale. We're looking at putting more bits on the network driven by larger fiber optic pipes that are feeding into the metro. The other important part is the traffic that's going onto the metro is moving from TDM, voice traffic of the past, to something that's predominantly Ethernet packet IP or even exclusively, ultimately, packet traffic. So the network needs to be rebuilt in the metro to handle that growth in packet specifically.
And in terms of their long-haul transport networks, what are the key trends that the service providers have to think about there to support fibre-to-the-home growth?
If you look at the carrier's network overall, you have the fiber access networks, which there's many different users, moving into the metro network, which is more of a condensed, consolidated area, and then feeding in ultimately to this backbone core network, where all of this traffic is converging. If you look at the access network, there's opportunities to split. We hear a lot about splitting, and that takes the burden off any individual part of the network. Looking at the core, nobody's talking about creating multiple core networks. So everything really is converging on this one single network, which needs to be large enough to accommodate all of the growth that we're talking about in terms of ultra broadband. So this brings in some of the key technologies we're hearing about in the backbone, which are 100G, 100 gigabit Ethernet, as well as a movement to large-scale OTN switching, both of which are really driving a lot of investment in the core right now.
But it's not just about the physical networks. The business case is absolutely critical to any fibre-to-the-home strategy. So I talked to Heavy Reading's chief analyst, Graham Finney, and asked him just how can operators make money out of their fibre access networks. Now, Graham, there's a lot of fibre being deployed in the access networks these days, but how can carriers actually make money out of these deployments?
That's a difficult question to answer. I mean, the first thing to say is that the idea that there's some killer application that justifies fibre to the home, forget it. You know, that's not going to work. You have to look at it in terms of saying, if you don't offer fibre to the home, what's the alternative? Because if you look at the history of the growth of bandwidth and the growth of applications, everything tells us that within a few years the existing copper network is not going to be adequate for the services that people want to use on the internet. So in order to stay in the game as a broadband provider, you're going to have to move to fibre to the home, and you're going to have to find a way to justify the investment. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, for the basic broadband service that you're going to get more money simply by moving to fibre to the home. In fact, certainly over the medium term, I just don't see that people are going to spend more money on broadband. Now, having said all of that, I think that the justification for moving to the fibre to the home, you know, apart from the fact that people want more bandwidth, is simply the fact that there will be more devices in the home that are connected to the internet. There'll be more applications used per device. More people will be connected. So the total number of applications which are used in the home is going to grow. That will consume more bandwidth. It will make the service more valuable, and therefore, there will be more opportunities in principle to monetize services. But, the operators have to think beyond fibre will create revenue. Revenue is created by being imaginative about the services that people might pay for, and that's independent of the medium.
What about 3D TV? Isn't that the kind of service that you could run over fibre and ask people to pay more money for?
Well, first of all, 3D TV is unproven at this stage. Now, obviously, it's the obvious near-term application, right? 3D TV is coming. People are deploying, or they're buying, and they're installing 3D TVs. Of itself, you can provide 3D TV on a high-speed broadband link, maybe using VDSL or one of the cable technologies. You don't actually need fibre into the home in order to do that. But it's true that over time, applications will emerge which will use the bandwidth. Maybe it's consumer telepresence, who knows what it is. Applications emerge which people don't anticipate. If the bandwidth's there, they will be created.
So in terms of the prospects for higher ARPU from fibre to the home investments, is that just not going to happen?
I don't think it will happen as a result of fibre to the home. It will happen as a result of people putting fibre to the home in and then opening up the network and allowing creative developers to find ways to persuade people to spend more money. That's how it's not going to happen. So it's not the fundamental technology, it's how it's deployed and how you involve people who create value on that broadband network.
Graham, thanks a lot.